invited every single athlete that they could find or think of with Japanese blood in them, and it was a lot. I mean, Johnny Morton, Chad Morton, this Devin Setaguchi, just with the Sharks now, certainly wasn't at that time, but there's certainly pop up here and there. It wouldn't be the predominant thing for people of Japanese American ancestry to be in professional sports, but they're out there. And I think, like any population, you're going to have tremendous athletes, and you're going to have a lot of people who aren't tremendous athletes.
How does your family and your relations relate to you choosing to become a sports writer?
I think I brought up before, we have 4 boys, so and 2 parents who love sports, love to watch sports, love to talk sports. So it just was part of the conversation. It was part of what we did. We played. I played, youth sports all the way through high school. Because it was the conversation, and I'd say mostly my oldest brother, who is a lawyer now, but he's the one who, when he was in law school, and I think I was in high school, whenever that was, and he was listening to me say I wanted to be a lawyer. He was saying, I don't know if you want to do that. You're like me. Why don't you try something else? If you can write, find yourself a job there, and if you could write sports, hey, that would be incredible. And I never really thought about it at that point. But once I got to college and I saw the other choices, and I was in journalism school, and it just made a little bit of decision, am I going to be a rock and roll critic, or am I going to be a sports writer? Let's try sports writer. And it just took off from there. So I think I still credit and blame my brother for that, because he was saying, you may not want the law school thing. Try something else. Then if you like it, you'll know and you'll stay there. And if you don't like it, you can always come back to law. And I never even blinked once I started getting into sports writing. Didn't even blink. It just became part of what I was. Ridiculously natural for me, bad or good, through the bad times and good times. Never been a moment's hesitation, and that's what I ought to be doing.
Why are you a sports writer?
Because it became relative, and I don't want to say easy, that's a kind of a bad buzzword there, but it came relatively naturally to me. Even in college, I was doing different things. You run through the different student newspaper jobs, and once I started covering Northwestern baseball or basketball or whatever, it seemed natural to me. I didn't have to go far to figure out how to do it. I didn't have to whip myself into learning those skills to do it. I didn't have to, tap ridiculous resources that I didn't know I had or couldn't figure out I had. It was all there. It wasn't good, but it was all there. And I tell this to other people, once I realized I could be a sports writer, it was probably my junior year in college, I realized I didn't have to go to grad school anymore, and I realized I could do this for another 20 years. Well, it's been about 20 years now, by the way, which is a weird reminder to myself, but I just knew I could do it. I didn't know how good I could be. I didn't know if I was going to be paid well. I didn't know where I would be. I knew I could do this, though. I just knew it. And I went to Philly right out of college, and that just was a further indication to me. This was something I wanted to do for a long time. Didn't even think about anything else because the job seemed to come to me. I didn't have to scramble, and it didn't seem, it was hellaciously hard work, but it was fun work. It was entertaining to me, and it hasn't ceased to be entertaining. It's only become more entertaining, I think.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Northwestern, outside Chicago.
Undergraduate?
Undergraduate, yeah. That's the one that when I figured out I didn't need to pay another $20,000 for graduate school was one of the greatest days of my life because no longer was that worried with getting C pluses on the science project or anything like that. Finished in 4 years because you better finish Northwestern in 4 years or else you're going to be paying more money, and got right out. Started there in 83 and got out in summer of 87.
And where did you go in Philadelphia?
Philadelphia Daily News, the punchy tabloid, which had a history of hiring young writers. I didn't really know this at the time, but when they sent me the sections, when I was looking at it, incredible stuff. Gary Smith had left by then, but I knew he'd been there. John Shullian had been there and gone. Mark Wicker was there. Some incredible writing, of, page after page of stories about the Flyers and the Sixers and the Eagles and the Phillies. It just was an incredible place to go, realize that this is, it was the full throat of East Coast passionate sports. Tremendous place to start, scary place to start, but just get thrown right in the middle of it. And once you get to speed on that kind of sports town, they were having sport. That was the beginning of Sports Talk in Philly, that WIP, getting on WIP, having to go on WIP, having to talk about the Eagles, because basically I took Rich Hoffman's place on the Eagles, whatever it was, 88, when he bumped up to Columnist, and I was 22, 23, and just either you do it or you don't, and I was doing it. And that was pretty heady stuff. I made some errors. I made some, good things. Some wild things happen. Some boring things happen. And at the end of, 2+ years there, I knew that I'd never have a busier time in Philly, but I also knew I was going to get back west. So that's when I got to the LA Times after 2.5, 3 years in Philly.
How would you compare your time at the Philadelphia Daily News, the LA Times, and the San Jose Mercury?
Well, the Philly thing is easy. It was mad, complete sprint. I don't remember a day off. I'm sure I had them somewhere in there, but I don't remember a day off. It was the Eagles at their, Buddy Ryan most raging. And they've been better since then. I don't think they've ever been more chaotic, and maybe the T.O. era was just as intense. But, man, that was a rock and roll time. Reggie White, Randall Cunningham, Jerome Brown, it just was nonstop. It was just, 22 years old, 23 years old, pedal to the metal, full out, back page, screaming headlines, rambunctious, get on the radio, people yell. It was really intense. I got to the LA Times in, 90, what was that? I can't even remember now. It was 87, 90, and to out of school 87, 90, 1990, covered the Rams out of the Orange County edition, which is back then the LA Times covered the Rams out of the Orange County edition. And it could not have been a greater kind of a step off a cliff. Ultra intense, ultra interested. You couldn't write a word about the backup quarterback that 50,000 people wouldn't be talking about. To the Rams, which was at that point they were a pretty good team. They'd just been beaten by the 49ers in the '89 NFC Championship game. Looked like they were a team on the rise, and they just fell off. They just dropped like a stone the moment I started covering them, which many of them jokingly blamed me for. But it just was a quieter, subdued kind of a, certainly not an intense situation. The Rams in Orange County was kind of a settled situation, and clearly, 6 or 7 years after that, they moved. It was not nearly passionate enough for an NFL fan base. There was something going on there that was weird. Pretty good team that fell completely apart in the 2.5, I guess I covered them for 3 years, and it just was almost by apathy it fell apart. It just fell apart. There was no rhythm to it. And then I was in LA for 7 more years covering a bunch of different things, Lakers at the end, which was definitely more intense, but not quite like Philly. And up here I've been a columnist, so it's been slightly different, but it's because of the internet and because of ESPN, I think it's certainly more regular. Everything's more the same across America, but if Philly's the most intense, LA was the most laid back, although certainly Lakers was not laid back. San Francisco's in between. It's in between. It's got more perspective than Philly. Certainly not going to go insane on every single thing, but there's the ability to be insane about a lot of things. The 49ers is going to drive people to a pretty high amount of hysteria if it's big enough. Something about Barry Bonds is going to drive people to a certain amount of intrigue if it's big enough. And it's not Philadelphia level, but it's somewhere, certainly somewhere higher than LA level, unless it involves, obviously, Kobe Bryant and the Lakers.
Right. When did you realize that the newspaper business model was in big trouble?
That's taking that as a fact, which I'm going to have to give you. I don't know when. I think it slowly dawned on all of us in this business. It might have been